What's up, everybody? Alan Johnson with the AJ team. Thanks for coming. We are here with two special guests, Brian Jones, Dwight Daniil, to talk about how you could take your business from being a subcontractor to a prime contractor. We all know businesses in the area that are subcontractors. I would think that their biggest hurdle is becoming a prime contractor. And why don't we talk a little bit about what that means? So, if I'm a subcontractor and I want to go to be a prime contractor, what does that mean?
Sure. A lot of the times it comes down to resources. So majority of small businesses that I know that are, majority of subcontracts are, a single person working in a business or a small team working in a business, and they need to identify and really assess whether, they can step out and be the leader of their organization and allow others to step in and take over their roles when they're usually supporting or working directly on those contracts as well. So it's really a juggling match and between really identifying what are those key opportunities that I can actually viably prime on based on a lot of factors: your past performance, your technical capability, the intimacy you have with certain customers, and really devising a strategy to be able to go after and get that.
Cool.
I want to stress relationships. Again, Dwight Daniil. I am not here in my official government capacity. The words and views expressed by me are not endorsed by the United States government, nor the Department of Health and Human Services. But relationships. This is a relationship business. Whether it's a subcontracting or prime, it is all about relationships. And how are you developing and cultivating the relationships to get the business? From my standpoint, it takes anywhere between 18 to 24 months in the federal space to really cultivate the right relationship. That's just the cultivation. We're not talking about the actual contract. That's just the cultivation. So how much time and resources are you dedicating to spend to what we call business development in the industry? And that is really going to be the difference between what takes you from, in my assessment, sub to a prime, is how much are you cultivating the right relationship to get you in front of the right opportunity when the right time clicks.
So tell us a little bit about just your experience. Tell us a little bit about what is your day-to-day look. So when someone comes to you guys, say we're at a bar, right? Say we're just relaxing, and they say, "Hey, what do you do?" And they find out what you do, and they're like, "Oh, I really could use your help." What does that look like?
I can take that. So my day-to-day as a officer in the small business space for the feds, if you meet with me during business hours, my expectation is that you know who I am. Not me personally, but my agency. The biggest fatal flaw that I see from small businesses is they do not do their homework. You can't come to me and expect me to help you if you don't even have the right questions to ask. And so doing your homework, taking the time to do the research, the most successful small businesses that I see are the ones that are the most savvy and FAR, understanding the laws that govern the GSA schedule, FAR Part 8, and understand the rules and dynamics of this space. How to ask for a post debrief on a requirement. If it's a GSA scheduled buy, it's not required. So understanding those dynamics, having the right questions to ask is critical. So when you come see me, I expect you to be prepared. I'm gonna give you a lot of information, as most people can tell you, because I'm a wealth of knowledge. I've been in the space for about 8 years. I've had an unlimited warrant, so I get it, I understand it. But it is my duty to help you guys succeed, but I can't help someone who isn't prepared. So do your homework, take the time to do the research and understand the market space that you're trying to go after, and then target the right entry points in that market.
Yeah, and my day starts with getting people prepared to go meet with Dwight. A majority of the folks that, in your scenario run into a bar, kind of what you do, how can you help me? I mean, I bring 14 years of federal government business development specific experience really across the professional services sector. And now kind of branching into, as the government's evolved into more, agile tactics and IT type infrastructure, I've been able to evolve into that space as well. And it's amazing how many folks go into these meetings without being prepared for anything. They want a majority of smalls that I've worked with and that I've gotten feedback from others on is they come in looking for a handout. And they're looking for, what contract can I get on right now because I'm struggling, I need some help. Well, you're one of 1,000 stories that person in the government has seen on any given day. The small business conferences out there, a lot of folks think it's a contract handout session when it's really we're offering you the opportunity to get to know us without you having any preconceived notions of where we can offer that assistance. And so on a day-to-day basis, depending on who I'm working with, what I'm working on, I'm doing everything from, writing a proposal section for somebody, evaluating a proposal to help them be more competitive from an evaluation standpoint. We're doing kind of all the lead up into that, which, takes into account, who's competing in this space specifically, who are your, target contacts within that agency that you need to go talk to so that the actual information outside of the RFP that gets released. How are they going to evaluate the proposal? How important is price versus technical versus past performance? And really getting an understanding of that so you can start planning ahead of the actual RFP release. So you can have your strategy for that specific opportunity identified, that fits within your grander strategy as you're pushing your business development forward.
Okay, so say a small business is trying to collect resources to get ready to be a prime on a contract. What are some resources that you would recommend that they target, some resources that they should be aware of that can help them get to the step before they're even coming to meet with you? Kind of explain some things that they should be looking out for.
Yeah, I'll start with that one. There's some key hurdles that I think you need to get over to really start looking at, am I even ready for a prime contract? The first hurdle is past performance, always. Do you have actual credible past performance that you can bring that's relevant to the scope of a contract that agency is specifically looking for? Do you have that in your background? Past performance on most contracts is, a significant aspect of the evaluation because it shows that, and it gives the government a risk assessment on whether you can successfully perform that contract in the future. And, there's many, many other hurdles. I think, Dwight and I have talked a couple of times on capital. Do you have the capital behind you, and can you prove it, that you can actually have a contract or hold a contract of a certain size? If you're a 5-person organization and you're going after a 20 or 30-person contract, that's a lot of capital that you need just from a personnel standpoint to cover payroll. And, the government always isn't the best at, paying on a 15 or 30-day schedule, even though there's been a lot of initiatives to pay small businesses in a 15-day time period. President Obama and the Small Business Administrator just pushed forward a rule to pay all small businesses, that obviously put their invoices in on time and all that within a 15-day time period. We'll see if that actually holds pant, but other folks are trying to make it easier on that end from the capital perspective. And I think the other one that I'll leave this comment with is really organizational development. Mm-hmm. Are you set up internally to handle a contract like this? Do you have the appropriate recruiting, human resources, staffing capability? If this is a cleared contract, do you have a facility clearance? Do you have the ability to even get a facility clearance from that standpoint? So there's a lot of things that go into these, into actually preparing yourself to be able to sustain and hold a prime contract.
I want to elaborate on what Brian just stated. So past performance. Folks should know past performance is a required evaluation factor for any contract estimated over $150,000. So it has to be, it's a mandatory by far an evaluation factor. So past performance is always key, especially if you're looking for large-scale requirements that are over 150. Capital, yes, capital. I can't stress that. We are not here to keep you guys afloat. We're here to get a job done. So I need you to at least have at a minimum 90-day working capital to bring staff on board, getting them running great day one, sign of the contract, and understand that the government is going to compensate you under the terms and conditions and agreements of that contract, hopefully in net 30. But you got to have the working capital. You know, we're not in the business of keeping businesses afloat. That has never been our job. It's never been our duty. We're here to meet a mission. And I'm hiring you to help us meet a mission, not to keep your business afloat. So having the working capital. And lastly, access to subject matter experts. I can't stress that enough. If you're a 1-2 man shop and you're looking to scale to, bring on a multi-million-dollar contracting requirement, that multi-million-dollar requirement is going to have at a minimum 20-something employees required with different skill sets and different competencies at every level. So what does your access to subject matter experts look like? If you're coming and knocking at my door at my particular agency, understand our mission is health. So naturally, MPHs, PhDs, statisticians, scientists are folks that are probably going to be somewhere involved in some of our large-scale projects. What does your access look like to those people? Do you have a direct line of contact to those subject matter experts in those fields? And how are you going to bring them on board? Consultants, or you can bring them on board as paid staff for your company? What does that look like? So that, in my viewpoint, is what it takes to scale from a sub to a prime from just a capacity level.
So we talked about some requirements and things like that. So let's talk about resources, okay? So I think we want to talk about, first of all, what resources are available that you think people should know about. I know we talked about George Mason's program, and I want you to speak a little bit more on that. And then also, once you have those resources, how do you identify the opportunities?
So I'll start first with the resources out there that are free and available to you or at minimal cost to you. So the Procurement Technical Assistance Centers, what we call acronym, I speak English and government acronym, so PTACs. PTACs are quasi-federally funded centers across the nation that are there to assist small businesses in equipping them with the infrastructure necessities of government contracting. So those are the workshops. Business consultants are there to really work with you hands-on, day in and day out, to really do that. Once you're ready for that, I always encourage you to reach out to the small business offices at the executive agencies and start to understand what it looks like from their market space. But be prepared. Don't just come knocking at their door, hey, who are you? No, do the research. A good website to find out the key points of contact for these organizations is osdbu.gov. There is a list on that website that lists every point of contact for every executive agency, small business office, including mine. So go to that website. And lastly, the Minority Business Development Centers, MBDA, has centers across the nation as well that are similar in nature and can do the same things as PTAC, but also for a larger scale for mid-sized small businesses that are looking to really expand into real large businesses.
Yeah, and from the contractor side, kind of looking in, there are a lot of resources that you can have access to. Some are easier to use than others. The first one for opportunity identification is FedBizOps or FBO.gov. I like to say that's the clearinghouse for everything, but my mantra is for the first time you see it's on FedBizOps, it's already too late. So consider that a competition won by somebody else. It's not always the case, but it's often the case. The next one, for opportunity identification is a paid service called GovWin. It's run by Deltek Systems. It's a combination and consolidation of a lot of systems that they've acquired over the years. It can be fairly expensive. It is a pipeline development tool, and you pay for that, and it essentially gives you an idea, the availability to look more forward. They monitor and track and watch all the opportunities that are out there, and really give you an identification of what type of contract this is, who the key players are, from a a government contact perspective, as well as if there are incumbents on the program. I use it as a support element in my business to support other small businesses that particularly can't afford it. So if they need some information about an opportunity, I have that resource available to them to be able to help them drive down some information there. Other data sources, and this is more in the data mining section, the Federal Procurement Data System, or FPDS.gov. That is a consolidated data house of all of government procurement activity that isn't behind kind of the black curtain of the intelligence community. And within there, all contract actions are recorded, so you can actually see the actions on a specific contract. And I use that a lot to identify, what activities have happened over the contract over time. Has there been, scope creep? Has there been, cost increases that weren't expected based on, an original contract award? And then, outside of systems, get involved with your, local chambers of commerce that have, government contracting councils. Join organizations like the Professional Services Council, if you're in that specific space that, are advocates for, large and small businesses focused in the professional services community. And, I could go on and on and on and talk on the acronyms of, NDIA, AFCEA, every agency that you're looking at, every customer that you're looking at, they're affiliated somehow with some kind of, professional services organization that focuses on those types of advocacy to those areas. So a lot of it's just really, Google search it, figure that out, and identify if it's worthwhile joining them, or at least having a conversation with them to see if there's a benefit to those organizations.
I do want to rebuttal one point that Brian stated. It depends on where we're at in the solicitation process for whether it's too late when you see something out on federal business opportunities. If it's an actual solicitation, yeah, it's probably too late. But if it's a source assault notice or a request for information, guys, that is your time to let the government know what you can do to meet our projected need upcoming. I cannot stress enough, that is your time to let the government know what your capabilities are to meet our needs. If you don't respond, 10 times out of 10, that requirement is going to go full and open. Small business community has to respond to market research. From our viewpoint in our end and the way we run it in our shops, the rule of two, and that's really across the government, where two small businesses are capable of performing the work and the government has a reasonable expectation that two small businesses will submit a bid on this project, we are required to set that aside for small business competition. Well, how do I know if two small businesses are capable if no small business responded? I don't. Even if I know of 1,000 firms out there that can do the work, your opportunity to respond was when I posted that RFI out and you didn't submit. And now you're mad at me because you can do the work, but it's now full and open and you got to compete against Lockheed.
And I'll add one additional component to that, and thanks for correcting that, because you're exactly right there. Even if you don't have 100% of the capabilities of the sources set or the RFI, find somebody you can respond with. It's never too early to identify teammates, and a lot of the times if you word it correctly and you see that, if there is a capability there, a combined capability, that will pass sometimes, depending on who's evaluating it, as a viable small business option for that.
So, Dwight, I'm going to ask you this question, and then we're going to have you answer the question. So, we talked a little bit about small business owners working in their business and working on their business, and even working for their business. And oftentimes they're doing all of it, right? So, and more than that. So, bottom line, should a small business hire a consultant to help them through this space? Is this something that is going to be over the head of someone who's out in the field, who's working on a current contract? Is it even worth them trying to trek down this path by themselves?
So, what I've found is a lot of folks want to be an entrepreneur, but not everyone can be a CEO. And what do I mean by that? there are a lot of folks out there who have worked for corporate America 20 plus years, gain a technical competency, a subject matter expertise in a particular field, and now they want to leave their corporate job and they want to do their own thing. Then that's great, and I applaud you and I want you to be successful. But you have to train yourself. You've known one technical competency and known it well for 20 plus years. Now you have to train your mindset to be a chief executive officer of a business. And what does that look like? And a lot of folks don't understand how to switch from trade skill, technical skill, to now executive level leadership. And that is the change that is needed from someone who is really either starting a business, owning a business, or looking to grow their business. Is you have to change your mindset from the technical competency of getting the business or job done to really executive leadership to grow the business. There are plenty of things out there that can do that for you, coaching classes, tutorial programs, training programs, and stuff like that. But you have to train your mentality to switch from being a technical expert to an executive leader of an organization. And I think that's where the hiccup is, and why a lot of folks from a small business perspective see themselves stagnant in growth, is because they're wearing 3 hats and they haven't learned to switch that executive hat on and strategically look at the business and say, how do I grow this organization?
Brian. So actually, you know what? I got a better question. So you as a consultant, you know, a small business comes to you. What does that relationship look like? And, you know, how could you help? There are a lot of people that are going to be seeing this. How could you help a small business that's having a hard time making that switch that Dwight was talking about?
Sure. So the focus of our organization is to scale with a business. We're not looking for the big contract right off the bat where, you know, you can pay me $30,000 a month to do all your business development activity for you. When you're growing your small business, it's all about a concept of capacity within your organization.
Absolutely.
Is what do you need to do at a minimum to get to your next level? Is it, you know, we've never done a strategic plan. Come in and help us think strategically about where we can go with our business. Well, you know, you don't need to hire me long term to do that. I'll come in. A lot of the times we'll provide a 2 to 3 hour session where you can bounce ideas off, because we need to know if this is a relationship that we want to be engaged with as well. We're learning from you as you're learning from us. And so as we really get down into the depths of it, everything always starts, especially with growing businesses, is understanding where you're going strategically. And strategically means, what customers are you going after? What types of contracts are you going to seek out? You know, who are the major players in those markets that can be, you know, the entryways into that? If you're a subcontractor, who are you working with now? Who can help you do I've worked with organizations that have been subbing with large businesses for many, many years, and they've never asked, would you sub to us on this opportunity? When, you know, they've been providing and have an exceptional past performance record with them. So it's taking advantage of those little opportunities to be able to, you know, make that step in. I mean, if you have for example, if you've been subbing to a Booz Allen or a Lockheed or an SAIC, one of the big large businesses everybody knows about, and, you know, they have to put in minimal effort to sub to you on something, and it, you know, fits somewhat within their plan. You know, a lot of the times they'll give you the opportunity to do that. But on the other end, you need to be able to take that opportunity and run with it. And that's where I see more of the support coming from a consultancy perspective. You know, after we've identified the strategy, how do you actually execute it when you have limited resources? Proposals aren't easy to write for somebody who's never written a proposal, or if somebody who's just ever responded to, you know, prime contractor data calls. You don't know what really goes into a full RFP package. I mean, everything from most RFP packages have a business and administrative volume, which, you know, they give directions on how to do it, but do you really know what all the standard forms mean and what blocks you have to fill out? All the way to, you know, how do we effectively, you know, we have the technical experts, but how do we turn, you know, technical subject matter expert writing into actually an understandable proposal language that, you know, somebody who's pulled in from the hallway during an evaluation can review it, as well as it makes sense to the subject matter experts that are the technical experts on those programs. And then we get into the the never-ending pit of how do you price it?
Key.
How do you effectively price a bid like this? And it's not just saying, well, it's, we're gonna guess and check as we go along, and if we lose this one, we'll learn and move forward. You're expending valuable company resources when you're going after these bids. And it's a full-time effort for a lot of folks in your organization, to include any consultants that you bring on. And so finding where you can find that happy medium and get the information you want out of that is critical. And that's where really I step in as a consultant for a lot of the organizations I work with. Is, they'll have somebody who understands how to write a proposal, but needs somebody to help review it and make sure it's got all that sanity check in there. Or they need somebody to just step in and run a process. Process is key in making sure you're hitting all of the requirements in these. Is if you write a proposal and submit it without anybody looking at it and reviewing it, good luck getting work in that agency ever again, because a lot of the times they remember the non-spell checked proposal and the run-on sentence proposal, and you end up being, remember that company that submitted that proposal? Well, here they are again. Let's see if that, and you don't want to set that reputation. It's supposed to be an even playing field every time you put it in, but if you've embarrassed yourself, it's a remembered trait when it comes down to that. So, short answer to my long answer there is hire consultants where you need them the most, and find a consultant that's going to scale with your company and isn't in there for a one-time hit and I got mine, now go off and do it.
So let's talk about internal resources. If there were a couple of internal resources that a business must have to support a prime, what are 2 or 3 must-haves that these businesses need to be working on now to prepare for their meetings with you and when you're writing those proposals?
I would definitely say a proposal manager. Proposal manager is key. I think Brian hit on it. Guys, we read these things. We read them. Every page that you submit, we read. Why? Because there's money on the line, and we cannot risk giving away the money to the wrong company. So we're reading everything, and if you don't understand the scope, if your proposal doesn't align with what we stated, you're not getting looked at, and it's hard to bounce back from that, and especially in a lot of agencies. So a proposal manager is one. Business development manager, someone who is solely dedicated on cultivating and growing and securing relationships for the business. To me, between the business development and proposal, the rest will come into play as you begin to grow the organization. You're definitely going to need someone solely dedicated to finances, so a CFO of the organization. But if you're looking to scale in the government contracting space, in my assessment, it will be a proposal manager and a BD person, in addition to the executive person of the organization, which would be 3 key positions right out the gate that you probably need in order to really scale from sub to prime.
And I'll add to that by saying, if it is a staffing-based contract, have some kind of recruiting resource associated with your company. Whether it's, again, another consultant that can help you identify those specific opportunities for, going out and finding the specific folks for you, or whether you make it part of your culture to actually identify and continuously recruit throughout the year in the specific fields that you're looking in. So you always have a constant base of evolving personnel. I'll caution you on that. Having a base of 200 personnel that you can talk about in your recruiting pipeline and your proposal, if you don't follow up with those people and don't constantly keep them warm on opportunities that are coming out, when you need them the most, they're not going to be available. And they're not going to really see you as a viable option, because it's almost like if you're not nice in the dating process, how's it going to be when we get engaged and get married down the road when we're actually working on a contract? I agree with Dwight on the BD folks within that. Again, whether you hire those as consultants or you're working to really build internally a subject matter expert base on proposals internally. A lot of the times, historical knowledge of where things have been done in the past, historical knowledge about your past performance. Those are critical things that can either be augmented by a consultant, or if you want to build the capability in-house, actually hiring somebody and making sure they're, it's not so much a level of compensation, but motivated to stay there longer term so they continue to grow with the company as well.
So, Brian, I want to follow up on an opportunity comes up that I think I can fill. Any tips on effectively pricing? We talked about pricing, but any specific tips on effectively pricing an opportunity?
Yeah, this is probably the biggest question that I get on a daily basis. And a lot of what we do is focused on that competitive pricing aspect to it. In the perfect world, you've identified the opportunity 18 months ahead of time. You've got in and meet with the customer. You know what, as close of a definition of what an independent government cost assessment is. And what that is, what the government used essentially to budget that opportunity. When they said, we need this amount of money to go run this opportunity, what went into that? If there's an incumbent contract, a lot of the times the IGCE is made from that contract. The billables over the last year, so they can get an understanding of, the size of the contract. If they do go forward with the incumbent, they're going to, in most cases, expect that plus a little bit more for escalation and other reasons. And then, it really comes down to, in my world, if you have all the perfect information, the number of people, and you don't even know the types of people, but the number of people, the value of the contract, you can work your way down into what's called a average fully burdened rate, where that is an average of all the employees plus all of the indirect costs that you have associated with that program, and then you can start working your cost structures into that. And the importance of having flexible indirect rate structures, and when I say indirect rates, fringe, a lot of the times your fringe benefits that you offer your employees are pretty inflexible. Those are things that are just ingrained in the organization and you provide. But things like your indirect and your general administrative costs as well as your fee, the flexibility in those to be able to adapt and work within a specific contract is critical. Whether you have independent cost pools that allow you to bid certain rates per certain contracts. We set up indirect cost pools for folks going after a certain market space that we know competitive wise, their full rate that they have for their company isn't competitive in that space. And we caution all the time, do not really go low on your direct labor, what you're actually going to pay your employees once they're on that contract. Because if you pay them too low, you're going to have a constant revolving door of employees on that program because they're going to get their experience and they're going to find another opportunity. And if you don't have the opportunity to either move them up or give them a little bit of increase, then you have the opportunity to actually affect the performance on the program because you'll have a spot open for X number of days while you're trying to backfill those positions. And so really it all comes down to the actual knowledge and understanding so that you're bidding it based on a price to win and not on a price to, that's one of the main things that we focus on from the aspect of making you ultra competitive from the standpoint. Because technical is going to be technical, price is a completely different deal.
And I want to add to price. Pricing is definitely key, but you have to understand what type of price we're looking for when we put a solicitation out. Most solicitations are going to fall within one or two categories: firm fixed price or cost reimbursement. Two different types of pricing, bidding, and information that we're looking for in a firm fixed price proposal versus a cost reimbursement. Way more detail is going to be needed in a cost reimbursement proposal versus a firm fixed price. And we're going to need to break down everything in a cost reimbursement proposal. And if you don't understand that dynamic, then you're not even ready to bid on that particular solicitation. So to me, it goes back to really the knowledge base. How well do you know the FAR? I can't stress that enough, man. I wake up, sometimes I read the FAR. That's just me. That's just the contracting officer in me. But that is the space that I know, that is the space that I own, that is the competency that I have. And I can tell you the folks that are successful understand the dynamics of the FAR, understand what is both applicable and allowable from a pricing standpoint on solicitations from a firm fixed price and a cost reimbursement. If we're talking cost reimbursement, no, you have to have an approved accounting system, and it has to be cleared by a government clearance house. If you don't have that, you're not eligible for award. End of story. It's in the FAR. That's not arguable. So going back to really the basics of really bare bones minimum knowledge, what is allowable, what is applicable, understanding from a pricing standpoint, you need to go back and read the federal acquisition regulations that govern that and know how to submit that from a proposal standpoint.
I think you had a question.
I do have a question with regards to, I guess this still speaks within the pricing piece, is when is it determined whether or not a contract is going to go out lowest technically acceptable or if it's going to go out best value?
I'll let you answer that first.
So that's really determined way back before we even begin to solicit the requirement. We have what we call acquisition planning. Acquisition planning is governed by Federal Acquisition Regulation, FAR Part 7. Would encourage you guys to go read that because that talks about what we have to do to actually acquisition plan for government requirements. And so in the acquisition planning stage, the contracting officer along with the end user, program manager, contracting officer representative, small business rep, make a determination, and ultimately the determination resides with the contracting officer, how that proposal is going to be evaluated. Is it going to be evaluated on best value analysis or lowest price technically acceptable? So it's determined in the acquisition planning stages way before that requirement ever hits the street.
And I guess to speak to Brian on that piece, so as a consultant, how do you adjust if you're talking about, lowest technically acceptable?
Mm-hmm.
How do you, if you have the wages that that particular company runs at, I'll say it like that, how do you adjust to that?
Sure, and I'll answer it two different ways. One is, how do we combat something going LPTA? And a lot of that is, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, is actually going in and talking with a contracting officer and the program office to illustrate why this is not what LPTA was built for is commodity-based contract. The services that are provided and LPTA has gone down a road that I don't think many thought it would go down, with actually asking for value-based services on a commodity cost schedule. And so it's really shaken up the market quite a bit, and has made folks get hyper competitive, and also made them default on a lot of contracts. Or to avoid the embarrassment of default, they get an equitable price adjustment after award. So they got the benefit of the award, they failed on the contract, but to save a little bit of face on the back end, they're able to convince somebody to give them an equitable adjustment. That's starting to go away a little bit. They're starting to hold more accountability aspects to that, but still it's a growing part of that. On the price competitiveness side, LPTA is a completely different animal when it comes to actually putting together a price to win. From there, you need to know who is competing on that opportunity. You need to know how they've competed in the past, and that information isn't always easy to find. A lot of the time, it's being in the game long enough to know and have a history of understanding where these contracts have been in the past. If there's information on the contract value now, you can identify what has lowest price been in the past, and really understanding the history of how that agency has awarded LPTA procurements in the past. Whether they do some level of too low price analysis. Most of the time price analysis is based on, is it too high, not is it too low, and really understanding and portraying in your technical proposal that going a certain direction may cause too much risk to a end user. You can influence the decision in your technical proposal. It's a little bit harder because they're evaluating what's technically acceptable, what meets the minimum requirements. I call it changing the shalls to the wills plus a little bit more. And then, as long as you hit that technically acceptable mark, you're going to be put in a pool of technically acceptable proposals. The program or the program team that actually is going to be the contracting officer's representative team gives them back the technically acceptable proposals, and the contracting officers review the price. So that's how they keep the disparity between the evaluation. And so all the contracting officer's looking at is, price, here's the price point, they're the lowest price. Did they come back with a technically acceptable proposal? 99% of the time, those are the ones that are gonna get the award. They do review everything, so there are risks associated with them, but it still comes down to technically acceptable. So really having a good solid understanding of, what the direct rates are gonna be. And frankly, bid to the minimum requirements. Don't give them any more. If it says a bachelor's plus 3 years, find them somebody with a bachelor's plus 3 years and compensate them for somebody with a bachelor's plus 3 years. And then, from there, it's understanding who your competition is and how they've competed in the past. And that's where more of the indirect cost play comes into bat. And we've seen, folks winning at a 1.25 wrap rate, which is barely covering your recoverable costs and your overhead and G&A, and a very, very minimal fringe package. But that's the market. That's the way LPTAs push the marketplace in those types of acquisitions.
So my last question, and I'll open it up to some more questions from you guys. So I find a great opportunity. I feel like I'm qualified. I've sat down. I've vetted with you. I've also, I've identified. I think I can price it correctly. I think I can support it. How do I go about finding teammates, and how do I go about finding support for me to be able to be a prime on a contract? Because oftentimes I've been a sub and I've been supporting someone else, and that's a completely different relationship. But now I'm the prime, so how do I find the support to help me in that process?
Yeah. So from a teaming perspective, teaming is an evolving practice in the government contracting space. If you're not out there meeting folks that are in your space and can actually support you and having long-term discussions with them, and really identifying opportunities that you want to go after together, you're not doing your job correctly in a business development role. It's all about, what else can we bring to the table that is either a capacity enhancer, a gap filler, or an appropriate redundancy that's needed to, avoid, a higher risk rating on your proposal. So I mentioned one earlier as it relates to, working with your current prime contractors. Finding and having a good relationship with them and then asking them, hey, would you be willing to subcontract to us on this opportunity? And with that, don't bring it to them last minute. A lot of organizations have a very robust business development process that they have to vet these opportunities through, to include large corporations having, risk rating approval boards that say, this program is too risky for us, it's a no-go. Or this program's too small for us, it's going to take too much of our internal resources, it's a no-go for us. So really understanding how those organizations work and being ahead of it, and cultivating it and showing, really, when you go into a client, you need to take the same practices when you're going in to talk to potential subcontractors, is know where they can play on your team. Don't let them translate it for you. Really identify, where they provide value so you can motivate and encourage them to want to be on your team. Because in most cases, they're talking to other folks about this same opportunity, and you really want to differentiate yourself as you're going forward with, identifying the absolute right team. And then a lot of it's showing the value of that team in your proposal, is really showing how they add to the differentiation aspects, and really pushing that forward as a forefront of the strength of the bid that you're pushing forward.
Additional resources, Brian mentioned your local Chamber of Commerce. A lot of these commerce, especially the ones in our area here in the greater DC area, have GovCon committees. Great networking space for business owners to meet one another, learn about their capabilities, targeted opportunities, and begin to forge the business relationships from there. Your trade industry associations, AFCEA, HIMSS, a number of these organizations, whatever your line of business is, it has a trade association attached to it, because that shows how America works. So tap into your line of business trade association, begin to see if it's a value add for the business to join, and begin to network. It really boils down to network. Now, if you're approaching, from my standpoint, a large prime subcontractor like Lockheed, and you're saying, hey, would you partner with me in going after this opportunity, it has to be a whiffing factor. So Lockheed, 9 times out of 10, has to have been losing work in this particular area, and they want to get that work back. And they know the only way they can get that back is to team with a small business. And what does that look like? So in my viewpoint, I tell small business all the time, what are your certifications as a small? You know, how accessible are you? Do I have to go through FAR Part 15 to get to you? Or can I minimize the time it takes to get the acquisition pushed through, and can I set this aside for you? Are you HubZone? Are you Service Disabled Veteran Owned? Are you 8A? How can I get to you quickly and leverage those small business certifications as a company to say, hey, oh, Lockheed, I know the customer over here really needs this, need has it coming up. They gotta have to go small. I gotta wait for them to get to me without going through the full acquisition process. And I know they want you on the project. Why won't you team with me? And I've seen that work tremendously. I've made deals work with large businesses. I'm very much known right now by 2 large companies I won't name off the top of my head. But it works. Large businesses, our Fortune 500 companies, understand that the government landscape is changing and that the government is pushing and growing and more small business friendly when it comes to government contracting opportunities. And so they would understand that it's going to take them to team with small businesses in order to continuously grow their business. So how do you forge that relationship? How do you leverage your small business certifications? And ultimately, how do you leverage your existing relationships, both with that prime and an end customer, to forge the right relationship from a business teaming perspective?
Okay. So any questions, any things that we haven't hit? I felt like we really, glossed over a whole bunch of things. Is there anything specific that you guys wanted to have answered?
When you, obviously every OSDBU office is not the same. Mm-hmm. So when you run into being able to, you were mentioning going to the OSDBU website, mm-hmm. and it lists every contact. When you're unable to make contact with certain OSDBU agencies, what would be that next step?
I always say it's called ethical stalking. At the end of the day, guys, I'm going to be honest with you. Just like any government entry standpoint, you're one of 100+ emails or phone calls that gets income on any given day. Realistically speaking, not making excuses, it's almost impossible to be responsive to every touch point that happens. Keep being persistent. I've never seen someone not get a contract by not being persistent. I've seen a lot of people not get contracts by just not being persistent. So keep being persistent. I mean, if there's a particular government agency you want to get in, keep knocking at that door until that door cracks. And when it cracks, kick it open. And take full advantage of it. A lot of these organizations, even from an OSDBU standpoint, the federal government at large is a grant-making institution. We're talking about contracts, but I actually want to hit on grants, and I'm going to tell you why. We do a lot of public outreach, a lot of public study, publications, open events, seminars around our grant programs at every agency, where we're talking about this grant that just happened on this low-income population and how we can better it through federal resources, yada, 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 yada. Well, in the room are decision makers who are there for that particular study release. That is a prime window and opportunity to be in the room with key decision makers, free, where you can network and cultivate the relationship from there. That is a great way. There are a lot of folks who don't see it like that. I understand the nature of my agency, and we're a grant-making agency, so I'm always encouraging small business to sign up for our sub-agency newsletters. If you're targeting, some of our sub-agencies, all these organizations publicize weekly newsletters and events that are happening, a lot of them on their grant program side of the house, where there are networking opportunities. There's a study being released. It's happening on this date. It's a webinar, whatever, what have you. Those are ways outside of the OSDBU shop to make entryway into the government space. Now, we always encourage you to work through the small business office because that is our job, that is our duty, understanding that some are responsive and some aren't. Not making excuses, just telling you how the game is. But that is a different approach that a lot of folks aren't taking advantage of. I can tell you it's been quite successful for the businesses that I've advised on that. Say, hey, go to this, see what happens. In addition to that, leverage other businesses. You know, small business, look, at the end of the day, guys, if you want to be the next Lockheed Martin, you're going to have to partner, you're going to have to collaborate, you're going to have to leverage one another. Let's share the apple, because it's a large pie. Let's share the apple, let's be resourceful to one another, and let's leverage one another to get each other in the door. And so between those three-pronged approaches, in addition to working with the small business office, and again, I want to stress, we are a great touch point for any small business out there. We cannot and will not give you a contract, but what we can do, will do, and must do is advocate for you in our small business procurement opportunities, and that is what we're designed to do per the Small Business Act of 1958. So that is what we do.
Yeah, and I'll just add to the ethical stalking aspects, is really pay attention to the industry events that have an OSTABU panel. That is an easy touch point. They're often kind of unguarded at those moments where there's an expectation that folks are going to come up and approach them and talk to them after the fact. Try to secure a meeting there if you want to have a meeting, or figure out if it's the head OSTABU at one of these, the actual, the person that runs the OSTABU office. Figure out who their touch points are that they can put you in contact with quickly. Because if you say an introduction is, I talked to so-and-so at this conference, sometimes it gets that crack in the door. It's, oh, somebody's already been pre-vetted, they said reach out to this person, and that's an opportunity. Also, the Small Business Administration puts on a lot of events that, a lot of the times the small business offices set up, tables where you can come and actually have that, industry look at that. And take advantage of those as well. Most of the time they're minimal cost or no cost to at least get in and talk to folks. And it's a great place to find those teaming relationships as well, because you're running into folks that are doing the same thing that you're trying to do. And then finally, I think the best part of that, or the best aspect, is go directly to the program offices when you want to know something about a specific program. And an OSTABU isn't being as responsive as you want them to be, just responding to the direct question. A lot of the times, a program office won't meet with you either. There's an acquisition window where conversations get cut off, and that window is getting larger and larger and larger, to the standpoint of, if you're not in talking to them a year ago, you're not going to get in the door anyway. So taking a look out and looking into it. It's the stress is on the pre-planning aspects of it and being able to identify those key stakeholders, so you're not going in at the last minute, because the last minute conversations are the ones that they want to have the absolute least.
And I do want to mention two other things around just communication and networking. So there's an annual major small business industry event next month, the 25th Annual Government Procurement Conference, Wednesday, April 14th, from 9 to 4 p.m. at the Convention Center downtown. This is the opportunity where you can meet a lot of our key decision makers across the federal space at a lot of executive agencies who will be there doing various workshops on their particular agencies and entities and how you get in the door, yada, yada, yada. A lot of small business reps will be there as well, so that is a great opportunity. They keep the registration fee low to a minimum so that small business owners can attend. And I encourage businesses that are in the area and not in the area who have the ways and means to get here and attend that event. You can make a lot of connections in a one-stop shop type deal, and so that is a great way to do it as well. Also, from market research, and I kind of want to rebuttal Brian just a little bit. We've kind of shifted over the past 2.5, 3 years, especially under this current administration, as it relates to vendor communication and outreach. during the acquisition planning process. So the Office of Federal Procurement Policy publicized what I think is probably one of the greatest things that we've done from a procurement standpoint back in 2011, Mythbusters. And what Mythbusters actually did was create a guideline and document and standardization of how the government is going to engage with industry during the acquisition process. And so there was this myth when I came into the industry that, oh, you can't talk to industry. You can't have communication with industry about a requirement. Well, that's not the case, guys. Because OFPP publicized that memo, it required every executive agency to put in place what we call a vendor communication plan. And what that vendor communication plan does, it outlines that executive agency's rules of engagement as it relates to vendor outreach and communication around federal acquisition requirements. And so every agency has a plan in place on how they are supposed to engage through industry. Now, the way we operate at my particular agency and how we engage with industry prior to a solicitation or RFP, RFQ hitting the street, we do RFIs. That is our way. It's no way, it's almost impossible for us to do industry days around every requirement. So we do RFIs. And it goes back to my point. That is your time to engage with us and let us know what you can and cannot do from a capability standpoint. But also, a lot of agencies actually do and host industry days. Attend their particular industry day. Go to it, sign up for it, make the connections there. And then a lot of small business offices at executive agency host monthly outreach days where they invite businesses to come in. Again, a lot of this information can be found on osdbu.gov, and if you go to particular executive websites, you'll see information on their various outreach programs and initiatives. But I do want to say that we are changing the tide across the federal space to really engage with small business industry in particular prior to issuance of the RFP, because we know the importance not only of allowing you the time to understand what we're thinking about doing, but also 9 times out of 10, you can help shape our ideas around what we're doing to drive a more innovative solution to the contract. And really that's what we're getting at, is really becoming more innovative and problem solving in our contracts versus just reporting. So that is the change and shift that we see. My last point, and I can't stress it enough because I'm a student of the FAR, there's an organization called the National Contract Management Association, NCMA. NCMA is pretty much the industry organization for anybody that's been a contracting officer, both in the private industry or in the government space, both at the state, local, and federal level. You want to get in a room with nothing but COs who understand it, get it, do it day in and day out. It can have some off-the-cuff conversations about what the game really is. I encourage you to attend an NCMA session or attend one of the NCMA events that goes on in the area. There are about 4 chapters in the area. There's DC, Tyson Corner, and Bethesda chapter, and a Woodbridge chapter as well. But NCMA is a great organization as well, where you can plug into folks who are contracting officers, contract specialists, both on the private end and government end, where you can get some real good conversations going around what it really takes to win in the federal space and in the local state space. So that is my point, and I'm done.
All right. So we are going to end there. I'm a real estate broker, and this has nothing to do with selling houses. But what we want to do is, within our network, we know wonderful people, and we want you to know those wonderful people. And I think this has been a tremendous blessing. Thank you guys for coming. Did you guys get something out of it?
Oh, yeah.
Got something out of it? So you have the dream. We have the address. Alan Johnson with the AJ team, and we'll see you soon.